All eyes will be on Canada this Friday as leaders of the world's wealthiest nations meet for the G7 summit. But it's unclear if there's more to divide them than to unite them, as many leaders have been left exasperated by controversial trade policies from the US President Donald Trump. Our correspondent Tatiana Anderson joins us now from Quebec City. Tatiana, the summit hasn't even officially begun, but it appears to be heading towards a very rocky start. What can you tell us?
That certainly is the case, and especially if you look at what's going on before the summit. We had French President Emmanuel Macron along with Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau meeting on Wednesday to talk about some of these issues. A big part of that, of course, trade. Neither leader happy with the way President Donald Trump has handled those tariffs on steel and aluminum. They are meeting ahead of this meeting to see how they can come together to perhaps change his mind, but it's no secret they are not happy with him. Neither are a lot of the other leaders who are coming here to the G7. And it's not just those leaders who are having those meetings ahead of this meeting. President Donald Trump is doing the same thing. He hosted Shinzo Abe at the White House today. And of course, a big topic that they talked about was trade. Somebody who knows a lot about all of this is Hugo Dobson. He is the head of the Asian Studies Department at the University of Sheffield, and he also knows a lot about how these multilateral organizations like the G7 and the G20 work. So I definitely want to bring him into the conversation. And Hugo, obviously, we had this meeting between Abe and Trump earlier today. They were very buddy-buddy in the White House. Is he Donald Trump's only friend at this point? I mean, characterize their relationship for us.
It is a very close and intimate relationship. I think Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been very proactive in ensuring that he gets as close to Trump as he possibly can. Before the election, the Japanese were worried about Trump winning. He was regarded as somebody who in the 1980s had been very critical of Japan, especially its trade practices, and he'd been bashing Japan a lot of the time. So Prime Minister Abe was the first leader to visit Trump in Trump Tower after his election. He was the second leader to meet with Trump officially after his inauguration. He's been very, very proactive as a Japanese Prime Minister, perhaps unlike a lot of other Japanese Prime Ministers, in ensuring that he can get as close to Trump as he possibly can. So there is certainly this close relationship that the two have. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to have difficult conversations with each other.
Yeah, a lot of difficult conversations will likely be had here at the G7. Main among them, of course, the trade tariff issue. Donald Trump instituting 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum. It's certainly a thorny topic. How likely is it, do you think, that the other leaders of the G7 are going to be able to convince Trump to change his mind on this? I mean, they're trying to build consensus.
Sure. I think one thing to remember about the G7 summit is that it's very different from a lot of the other international organizations. So the idea is that it's meant to be an informal gathering of leaders where they can meet, talk to each other face to face, man to man predominantly, and actually come up with decisions that are a consensus agreed as part of a fireside chat amongst like-minded leaders. So I think this is all going to be informal coaxing. This is not going to be beating each other over the head with a stick. This is going to be very much a sort of friendly gathering of leaders trying to bring around some kind of consensus. So I wouldn't expect any breakdown in the summit. I wouldn't expect there to be no declaration released on Saturday. All these things will happen, but it will take the leaders time to actually sit down and talk these things through informally.
They certainly don't have a lot of time. This is a two-day summit. It's got a packed agenda, and most of what is on the agenda is not on President Trump's agenda. Climate change, gender equality, multilateralism. How likely is it, do you think, that something can really come out of this? I know this is an informal topic, but the fact of the matter is that these are things President Trump doesn't want to talk about.
I would take issue with the statement that Trump doesn't care about all the issues on the agenda.
I didn't say care, I said he didn't want to talk about them.
Okay, fair. But there are things I think he'll also want to talk about on the agenda. So one of the themes is a more peaceful and secure world. Well, Trump's mind is clearly on the summit with North Korea on the 12th of June. That would lead to a more peaceful and secure world. Other themes like jobs for the future are clearly things that Trump is going to be interested in. And let's shift the focus away from Trump a little bit. If you look at, say, gender equality, then his daughter Ivanka Trump has been very active in a group called the W20, which is a stakeholder group within the G20, which promotes women's empowerment and women's rights. So I think, we can be a little bit more optimistic about the levels of engagement that we'll get from the US at the summit.
It certainly will be interesting to see, and hopefully we can talk about more of it with you after things get accomplished here. Hugo Dobson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And to give our viewers just a little bit more perspective on what's going on here, this is going to be U.S. President Donald Trump's first trip to Canada as President of the United States. Historically, it's a place that U.S. presidents make their first trip. But of course, Trump chose to make that Saudi Arabia when he became elected as president. So his first time here to his neighbor to the north. Most of the leaders are already here in Canada, or they're coming tonight. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel set to arrive on Friday. So is President Trump. That means he will be the last in here to Canada. He'll also be the first to leave. And you can be sure that Canadians aren't going to let that go unnoticed. There's also been some murmurings that President Trump isn't too happy to be coming to Canada. That is because he is looking at a very different agenda, perhaps a legacy to his presidency, which is going to be this meeting that he is going to have with North Korea's leader next week in Singapore. Oscar.
Tatiana Anderson, thank you for that from Quebec City.